This is our third study in our look at the Gospel of Matthew. We have been saying we are doing some preliminary remarks as we set the stage to actually look at the Gospel of Matthew. We have been talking about the kingdom of God, the centrality of it to the Gospel of Matthew, and more particularly, the teaching of Jesus. This morning we want to look at a text in the Gospel of Matthew that captures this, a text we're more familiar with from the Christmas narrative. This is Matthew chapter 2 and verses 1 to 2. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men came from the east to Jerusalem. They were saying, where is he who was born the King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. It has long been recognized that Matthew is the most Jewish of the four New Testament Gospels. We cannot be absolutely certain as to what the original audience of Matthew was. All four Gospels were originally written to a certain group, certain audience. One of the reasons we know that it was Jewish is the sensitivity found in the Gospel of Matthew to Jewish sensibilities. If we compare, say, Matthew chapter 4, verses 12 to 17 with Mark 1, 14 and 15, we see the sensitivity at work. In both these passages, we have a similar event. But in Mark's gospel, the kingdom of God is mentioned. Matthew talks of the kingdom of heaven. Is there any difference between these two passages and in these two phrases? The answer is no. You see, in the first century, Jews, as a rule, avoided the use of the divine name. So when we talk of the kingdom of God, and Matthew talks of the kingdom of heaven, do not think that these are two distinct terms. Matthew's writing to Jews. Now, notice we said that Matthew is the most Jewish of the four Gospels. We need to understand what that does not mean. In the era that the Christian church was born, Judaism, for the most part, was an exclusive group. What I mean is that there was no use for Gentiles. Gentiles were not Jewish and therefore considered as nothing. In modern terminology, we would call this racism. Now, do not feel sorry for the Romans of this period, because the Romans could give it back out just as good as the Jewish people did to the Romans. Now, are we saying that Matthew, as a product of that era, was as racist as some, not all, as some of the Jews? The answer is no. One of the remarkable things about this most Jewish of the Gospels is that Matthew makes it clear that the faith, that Christian faith, is for all people. Notice in our passage who comes looking for the King of the Jews. Let me give you a hint. It was not a Jew. It is not always the case that the most important thought in the passage is what has been written down. In a very subtle way, Matthew, to use an expression, is rubbing the nose of his compatriot Jews. It was the Gentiles who came looking for the King of the Jews. It was not the religious establishment. At the close of Matthew chapter 28, we have the Great Commission. Matthew is the most Jewish of the Gospels, and yet it is only in Matthew that we have this passage. And this passage makes it clear that the Christian faith is not a Jewish only faith. It is a faith that is for all people. You see, the kingdom of God is not some extra. The kingdom of God is what the world needs, and it is the kingdom of God that people are actually looking for. Yes, the kingdom of God comes from the people of the Old Testament, but it does not remain with these people. The kingdom of God is something that is never ours alone. The kingdom of God is something that is for all people. And it is to all people, even people who are not like us, that we must take the kingdom of God to.